Said, you may go, I'm not going. He said, no, you go in the prayer room there in the chapel and ask God if he wants you to go. He said, no, I'm not. The night they got there, they were at the Ati River and sitting there on the river. He had to go down to the river to get some water. He comes running back, screaming. He doesn't have his bucket with him. He's screaming as loud as he said, I just saw the biggest snake I've ever seen in my life. And they went down and they found the snake and they killed an 11-foot python that was down there on the riverbank. And so they went to sleep there in the Jeep, going to cross the next morning, Ati River, and as they're sitting there, they hear something in the night, and they turn on the lights, and there is a huge lion right out in front of that Jeep. And they flash the lights at the lion, and the lion starts moving toward them. And then they honk the horn, and the lion gets closer. They turn on the windshield wipers to try to scare it off, and it got closer. Pastor, please don't do another thing. That lion's coming to get us. And so then they began to do it all. Honk the horn, flash the lights, scream to the top of their voice, and the lion went trotting off into the jungle. I mean, it was just a wilderness. It was a place where the gospel had never been preached before, and the people had never seen an automobile. The next morning they found a place where the river was low, and they put it in four-wheel drive, and they crossed the Ati River. And so they go and they find this chief, and they found this village. And they tell them, said, you know, we've come because we wanted to come and minister to you. And he's talking through the interpreter. And he said, well, you can. He said, well, why can't we? He said, you can, because we've been told there's going to be someone with a white man and a black man that are going to be on a four-wheel bicycle. A four-wheel bicycle that are going to come, and they're going to come to us with a key to heaven, to open heaven. We've been told in a prophecy this is going to happen, in a vision. And so they said to him, well, we're going to unpack the Jeep. We've got to rest. We've been traveling all night. We were up all night because the lions and all the animals disturbed us all night. We couldn't sleep a wink. They was afraid that lion would come back. He said to him, the chief said to him, is your desire for sleep more important to you than our desire for you to give us the key that opens up heaven? And so they took the Bible. They turned to the book of John, and they began to read. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. The same was in the beginning with God, and the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. The people began to gather and collect from every little outpost that they had, from every little tiny village. They came until the entire mountain was filled. They read the Word of God to them for 1.5 days without stopping, because it was the key that would open up heaven. Then he gave an invitation after 1.5 days, not breaking to eat, just reading the Word of God to them. Not breaking, not stopping, just reading the Word of God to them. And after 1.5 days, he gave an invitation, and every person came forward to get right with God. He said, no, you don't understand. This means you have to give up your primitive ways. You have to give up your idols. You have to give up your witchcraft. You have to give up your incantations. You have to give up all of those things. You have to give it all up. When this happened, he gave another invitation, and they came and crowded even closer to him. He was totally dumbfounded, totally swept off his feet. He could not imagine such a response. And so he stood there dumbfounded after the entire tribe. To this day, 99% of those people still live for God. What's fascinating is that he said, why have you received us so well? And he called for an older woman, and she came and stood there. He said when she was a young girl, she had a vision that there was going to be a black man and a white man would come to us on a four-wheel bicycle. And then he said to one of the boys, go get one of the elephant dung balls and bring it to us. And they went and got one of the dung balls, and standing there right by the Jeep, they cracked that dung ball open, and all of a sudden red beetles began to run out of that dung ball. They were the same color of that Jeep. And God had spoken to her so many years before and told her that when this Jeep, when this four-wheel bicycle comes, it's going to be the same color as the beetles in that dung ball. Now, I want you to listen to what I'm getting ready to tell you. Only God knows the end from the beginning. Only God knows these things. He comes back to America. He's no longer a missionary. He's a missionary heart. He raises millions and millions of dollars for missions. He's in Clearwater, Florida as a pastor. At the close of a service, a woman walks up to him. And the woman said, "You don't know me." And she was very old. She was elderly. Said, "You don't know me." And said, "Many years ago in Martinsburg, Virginia, my husband gave you the only thing that we owned that was ours. He gave it to you. He gave you our Jeep." Said, "We went home and I cussed him and he cussed me day after day after day for giving the only thing that we owned. I cussed him." Said, but about a month later, said there was some men at the barber shop and they were laughing at him at the Martinsburg barber shop, just a bunch of men. But on that day, there was a man that was sitting in the chair that was a businessman. He was a Baptist man, a good man, and he heard the story. And he went and knocked on his doors 3 days later. He knocked on his door at that little sharecropper house. He said, "I heard about the Jeep that you gave in the last few days." He said, "I own a truck dealership, and I want you to come down. I'm going to give you a brand new pickup truck." He gave him a brand new pickup truck. Now, that missionary didn't know that story. He didn't know how that there was going to be a wonderful, flourishing finish to what God had started in his life so many years before in Martinsburg, Virginia. He didn't know how far that sacrificial gift was going to go. But what happened was this. She looked at him and she said, "Pastor, my wife, my husband died just a few weeks ago. And I want you to know that sharecropper's farm that we worked, it became our property. It became our home.